Hello everyone and welcome back to Media.wmv. I'm your host Odrin Johnson and you're watching Young People in Politics, the show that aims to bring you the interesting discussions and stories of those in the Irish political landscape, both on a youth and senior level. Today I'm joined by current Deputy Mayor of Fingal, Councillor Daniel Whooley. Danny's a 22-year-old Green Party councillor and current cybersecurity student at TU Dublin. After joining the Green Party, he quickly established himself as one to watch. At only 20 years old, he ran and won his first election, running for a Fingal County Council seat in the Ongar constituency on May 24th, 2019. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you. And I'm probably one of the bigger, I don't know, would you describe yourself as one of the big youth politicians in Ireland today?
God, no.
That was a tricky question to start with, I think.
I don't think so. But I guess I would hate, it's really weird. I hate when people call me Councillor Whooley because I feel like, I don't know, like, just Daniel seems great. I'm not great to the whole accepting, like, I'm a councillor, I have this title, or even when you say like I'm a big youth voice of politics, it kind of like scares me a bit, so I'm still used to it all.
I suppose obviously people will be a little bit familiar maybe with yourself after you were elected as Deputy Mayor. I think there was a big, I suppose a moderate to large level of sort of notoriety came online surrounding that because you are so young and you got elected as Deputy Mayor Fingal. But for those who maybe obviously don't know who you are, how would you kind of summarise yourself to someone who just met you?
Oh, Jesus, I don't know. You're putting me on the spot here. How would I summarize myself? Just a guy who loves his community, who knows what it's like being a young person during the crash. And I kind of want to make sure that there is structures and protections for young people and for Ongar and for everyone else in the county. And I'm pushing to do that and make life a bit easier.
And obviously, you're studying cybersecurity, or at least you've deferred your final year for the moment to focus on council work. But what is it about politics that kind of drew you in? What was the can you remember the first time you were first kind of exposed to politics, and then kind of what really sort of made you not jump down that rabbit hole, but also just kind of get engrossed in the sort of all of it?
It's a bit of a long story, and I didn't like get into politics and then stay in it. I was involved in a lot of like youth groups in my area. There's 2 or 3 big community centres around here, and a youth worker asked me to join this project that Ferrega, the youth organisation out here, had, and it was supposed to be like a way to have different communities in the Dublin 15 area come together who were young, and then if organisations or Ferrega or other companies were looking for a youth voice, we'd sort of be like the go-to. So we'd have someone from Hartstown, from Huntstown, from Mulhuddard, and then from Castleknock and other areas. And sort of from there, we did a lot of stuff. And I remember the 2014 local, no, it might mean the 2016 general. I'm trying to think now. It was a while ago. They had young people come in, and I was like, have a discussion with politicians or candidates at the time. And that was the first real time I had a sort of like glimpse at politics, talking to people who would have been in power. And it was the first time I met Roderick, who was my mentor and is now a minister. And I kind of enjoyed that. Then I didn't get involved much in the politics side, stayed and worked my way up in Ferrega. And then there was a second event for almost been another election happening at another stage. And that's again where I saw some more politicians realised at a more mature age that this was the area to make change. That it's great being on the young people activist side, but if you don't have a young person who doesn't really understand what it's like being in these situations, who isn't maybe pushing for this, or it's not like a prism to see these issues through, the likelihood of something getting done is low. I'm not saying it's not going to get done, but I guess when you come from different backgrounds, different communities, your perspective and things are different. I hit 18, I was too old for it, so I became a volunteer locally, but then I got involved in the Greens. I think it was the last IPCC report that came out that scared me senseless. Joined the Greens, became a bit of a radical member in there. There was no one out in Ongar running, so I ran. I did not think I was going to win. I was like, who's going to vote for a 20-year-old college student? And enough of my friends, family and peers had voted, and I convinced obviously other people who did not know me that I was better than other candidates, which was really humbling and really daunting, because you then feel the responsibility of a whole area and a whole community put on you, and it kind of matures you pretty quick for a 20-year-old.
Yeah, and obviously we're talking about that. You mentioned you weren't expecting, you weren't even thinking about the chance of you possibly winning. When it did look more, because there's always that stage for politicians where they don't think they're going to win. They get to the count center, they see the numbers and like, oh, maybe if this happens or that happens, it could go this way or that way. Kind of describe not the elation of when you won, but sort of the middle ground between you're like, oh my god, I might actually win this. Like, when was the realization of that, and how did that feel?
It was after the first tally in my area, and there was a general tally done, and I think I was in 6th behind, like with like a dozen votes behind who was in 5th on the tally. And I was talking to Francis Duffy, the TD, who was a councillor at the time in was it the RDS? The initial guy was in the RDS, and I was like, listen, I've never done it before and it looks good, but I need someone who actually knows what they're doing. Can you have a look at this? And he looked at it and he goes, I think you have that seat. And it became very surreal. I felt like it was in a dream. It didn't. I'd always thought that I was always going to end up losing. That even if I had it and it looked like I was going to have it, that the next candidate who'd get knocked out would put a lot of votes into the person who was behind me and move up ahead of me. It was really strange. And I just remember like not sleeping and not eating that day. And it was at the end of that weekend, I realized I was starving, and it was because I never ate.
And do you think, like, even after you won, what was the sort of what were the celebration plans per se, or like what was it? What was the first thing you wanted to do? There was none. You just went home and went to bed. Is it?
Yeah, did not think did not think it. In fact, my mom, God bless her soul, she decided to take down some of the posters in case I had lost, so I wouldn't have to drive home and see all my my face as I'm going home realizing I've lost. So she tried to do that and fell off a ladder. She's okay, but she came back to the count center and she was like, kind of like sore, like, and I'm like, what did you do? She's like, I fell off a ladder trying to take down your posters. But there was no plans. I never thought I was going to win, so I didn't organize drinks. I was doing the final week of the vote. I had my college exams, so I had no time to organize a party because I was still in study mode. So yeah, actually, come to think of it, there was nothing. There was no events. I said thank you, sent a lot of texts, but that was about it.
I think I remember reading a piece you were featured in on spunout.ie, and it was surrounding when you had ran, kind of what it was like, and you mentioned like that you overestimated going to way too many houses because there was yourself and your campaign manager, and you mentioned for most nights it was just like the two of you out there. Was that even more of a surprise that you managed to do it with such a small team, or were there sort of more people that maybe you didn't get to mention in that piece that I'm unaware of?
I was so naive at the start. I thought I could get to every house, and I think there's 12 to 14,000 houses in my area. I thought I could do that, and I got enough leaflets to do that, but of course I didn't, because I just said there was myself and my campaign manager, which I feel like doesn't do him enough credit. He was my best friend, and was volunteering with the party and other candidates. So he came out as often as he could, but he also had responsibilities to others. And I was just myself most nights. And I would be finishing college at 5 or 6, running home, getting changed, out the door till 9, half 9. And I was so surprised because, as you said, I'd got through enough estates. I thought that I would have looked competitive, but I didn't think I was going to win. And I had left out some estates that I should have probably canvassed more than once. Just because I thought, like, I can't risk redoing them and missing another area where I could get votes. So it's a shocker. But I was out every night There's been plenty of times where my friends were like going out having drinks, and I had to say no and be responsible and work. And again, I'm very happy it paid off, but it would have been really disappointing if it didn't at the same time, just because I put so much into it.
And then obviously, you know, in a more recent sort of Irish Independent article, you were talking about the leaving cert and all that surrounding it. But in that, you obviously mentioned that you deferred your final year of your degree. And, you know, that brings up the interesting question, because obviously whenever you talk to a councillor, it's like, it's down as sort of this almost part-time job, but it never really is that. How do you kind of feel yourself trying to cope with not trying to overwork yourself or burn yourself out so early on into the sort of the council tenure, or is it the case that, you know, when it comes to council work, you can't really control how much time or effort you have to put into it? It just kind of gets thrown at you.
It's a bit about like, so it is. So right now, because it's August, the council's closed and generally everything's in recess. Things are a bit easier in August, so most councillors would take a few weeks off. And then you notice in certain stages when certain things are happening, it picks up again. So you can't really control when you're working, but I'd like to put in between 25 to 40 hours a week, depending what's going on. I deferred because I was in my third year last year, and in cybersecurity, there's a huge deficit in people in the industry. So my course did a very smart thing where you would have a group unofficial thesis to write with another friend or person in the course. And I was doing that on top of doing so many other stuff in the council that I was up most nights till 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon, pulling double or triple back-to-back nights. And it was wasn't great, particularly with COVID and all the other negativity that goes around with the global pandemic. And I realized that I'd rather not risk that and take a year off. I would realize I'm in no rush, go back to college next year after the deputy mayor thing ends, and I could get my degree. But it is at the same time a full-time and a part-time job. I've seen councillors put in less hours because they can. I've seen other councillors treat this as the full 40+ hour job, and it's it's kind of as much as you want to put in, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. I feel like you leave it up to potentially being other councillors not doing enough work. But then again, you could have great people, and there's a lot of great councillors who do more than enough. Yeah.
In that same sort of discussion in the Irish Independent, you said, I felt like when I failed the Leaving Cert, I expected like a big game over screen to pop up and just to drop through it, and that's because how it's made out to be, but it's not like that at all. Why do you think, you know, we put so much pressure on young people facing their final school exams?
Probably because the world we live in, I guess, the sort of, not to sound like some airy-fairy, but like society has made us seem like that. It's almost like you go to primary school, secondary school, college, get a good job, settle down, retire, and that's life. And when you do anything that might disrupt that path, for me, it felt like you were like on a conveyor belt and you go off that path and you could fall down the edge and there's no direction. And it would have been the first time in my life where I had no direction. I forget the course, but I think the course I wanted to do was like 400+ points, and I got 260. And I wasn't for any other reason, but I just didn't study. There was like, my friends and I saw 6 years our last year rather than transition into college. So we had fun, went out a lot. I just didn't take it seriously. And then when I sat down to study like a week beforehand, it was too late. And then my friends and I started to play some video games the day of a lot of exams because we were kids. We were 17, 18, and I think it's a lot of pressure to put on a kid. But then we have like so many options, and I realize now with PLCs, with level 7s, that there are so many other alternative pathways. And a lot of my friends who I've seen who would have been academically smart and got great points have done courses or gone into work that they've enjoyed but may have not been predicted for them, and vice versa. People who may have not been great in secondary school going on to do some amazing things, but because they didn't get the points or because they were great at history, but one was good at Irish, and they couldn't make up the difference in points, that they had a bad Leaving Cert.
And do you think even, you know, obviously after the last 2 years and there's been some general restructuring temporarily for the Leaving Cert, do you think there's any sort of, there still doesn't seem to be, at least from an outsider perspective, that much drive to change the core system of the Leaving Cert. Do you think there's a particular reason for that, given so many people have a similar experience to yourself and finding these pressures for the Leaving Cert way too much to handle?
Not to start harping on, but I don't think it's maybe within the current parties, the party of Fianna Fáil, maybe to change the Leaving Cert radically. Maybe they just haven't developed the policy enough, or it's just not something that they want to spend political will on. It's the same parties in the Department of Housing. I think they're on public expenditure, so I'd say they probably would rather put their political will and effort into something like that. Whether you agree or disagree, just education isn't that area that they want to focus on real change, which is a shame because, as you said yourself, I think the world is changing, and there is an oversaturation of college degrees, and Michael D came out and said that. And I think maybe we should change our perspective on education, instead of producing potential employees, but actually providing a strong foundation of education for a lot of this country. I realized, because I've recently moved out, there's some basic things I did not know how to do. Cook. I used a washing machine for the first time. And I did so many other things that I've never done before. And I think if we were to teach kids about a healthy and balanced diet, how to cook, what foods to avoid, so average calorie count, I think you end up producing a healthier population, but also a population that has the skills to be competent in a non-working environment. Even, I can't believe I'm agreeing saying this, but like in schools providing driving lessons or the skills like that, it just means we're not reliant on just like doing these 6 or 12 I don't know, subjects, and then that's it, you're done. If you don't have to study this again, or you don't need to use this again. And I know it's the same joke, like, oh, when are you going to use trigonometry again? But yeah.
I think I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, because you said you don't like being referred to as Councillor Whooley. As an elected representative, did you kind of notice a stark shift in how normal people would approach you? And, you know, kind of then just on top of that, do you feel yourself that you had to present yourself differently to those people? And if so, do you think it's a necessary sacrifice in being a public representative?
The first thing I noticed is my friends started taking the laugh out of me a lot more and start calling me Councillor. And they knew it bugged me. No, I probably have a very different view of my job compared to most elected reps. I see my job the exact same, like as a job, and a job I'm very fortunate to love and enjoy, but it's no different to someone who works as a cashier in your local supermarket, or somebody who is a secretary for a local office. It's another job, and I don't think I have any extra privilege or privilege is the right word, I think, that entitles me to be more cocky or for people to treat me any differently. And what you said about the image, I did. I saw, because our idea of a politician is a guy in a suit. Initially, when I became a public rep, I changed how I dressed. I became more formal, and that was not who I was, but I felt like that's what I needed to be to fill that public perception. And it was after a discussion with another councillor who became a councillor at a young age, who said, screw that. Be who you are. You were elected to be who you are. And you're better off going out winning or losing, being yourself, rather than molding yourself to try fit the voters, because then you lose your identity. And so I as you see right now, I'm dressing casually in a jumper, and I prefer, and I feel more comfortable in my job doing this than I would in a shirt and a tie. Now obviously that's different for like deputy mayoral duties. I'm going to wear a shirt and a tie, but I'd rather be this, and I think it's better for people to see politicians dressing as themselves, because I think like some of the best politicians we've seen are good not because they're wearing a suit or because they're wearing a tie, but it's because of who they are. And I think on the flip side, we've seen politicians who have destroyed countries because and the whole thing about like, you know, certain industries having a huge influence, and it's because they wear a shirt and a tie, and I guess that perception that has isn't great on politicians. So wear whatever makes you feel comfortable, and once you're not coming in like I don't know, like short shorts and a GA top, I think you'd be grand for most things.
You know, I want to touch on your position of the Green Party a little bit, because, you know, recently in more recent polls, we've seen sort of a general displeasure at the current state of the Green Party. But I want to touch on maybe something that isn't discussed a lot. What do you think is one thing that people never really take into account when judging a politician's performance?
Ooh, that is a great question. What is one thing people don't take into account? I don't know. Jesus, you're leaving me stumped. Probably their ability to keep on working. Like for a lot of people behind this, and a lot of politicians really want to talk about what happens behind the scenes. But I know a lot will work on issues and don't say it out loud. That, like you said, because we're in government and that's good and bad. I know many councillors who, when something bad pops up, email the TDs who lobby them, who organise groups within the councillors to have a unified voice. And it's not heard by the general public, but it does happen behind the scenes. And I think the whole idea that if you don't cut it out publicly, that you're doing nothing about it, that perception is really wrong for a lot of people, particularly within the Greens, where I think, regardless if they like or dislike what the party is doing, I think we all, and that's why we're in the party, we all believe we're trying to do the right thing. Maybe the methods are wrong, but the thoughts in the right place. And I'm not sure if that's the same in other parties, but we try our best.
Do you think there's almost a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of situation when it comes to, you know, I suppose representing individuals in your constituency? Because there's obviously, as you mentioned, there's this notion of all the time that people need to be seen to be doing work rather than actually just doing it. And then you get this sort of perception sense like, oh, this politician just showed up for the picture at the end, and look, they're claiming this work off this other person. How do you find it? Do you think there's a balance between showing yourself online to people to sort of show that level of work, or do you think, you know, politicians can get away with really just not having an online profile today and just doing work in the background?
A bit of both. I think if you have to sell yourself, and it's the part of the job I hate. I won't call myself an introvert, but I'm not. It feels really weird, almost like selling yourself as a product and being like, I'm doing this, vote for me. I'm not actually, I don't know, just doing the work and then the work show for it. And maybe it's a generational thing, you might agree with me, but I dislike Facebook so much. It's the app for my parents, but I despise it. I prefer Twitter, I prefer Instagram, I prefer TikTok. But Facebook just is horrible to work with. So I think for a lot of politicians, you can not use Facebook or Twitter and Instagram, but you use more conventional methods, leafleting, public meetings, all that jazz. But at the same time, you can, and politicians have, I've seen it firsthand, do nothing, turn up for a photo shoot, claim all the credit, and win. And it's bad, and it's annoying, and frustrating. But whether people claim the work without doing it, if somebody's still doing the work and something good comes out of it, then I don't really mind if another councillor gets credit, because in the end something good has happened. And whether it comes out if it was myself or somebody else, in the end who did the work, doesn't bother me, because at our core, our job is to improve our area, not to take credit to improve our area. And once that core is, someone's doing it, I think that's okay.
Both yourself and Sean O'Ruddy are, you know, the current Lord Mayor and Deputy Lord Mayor, Fingal, and you know, both of you were elected for the first time in 2019. How have you sort of adjusted to the new role? Have you yourself and Sean have been in contact a good bit? And has there been anyone in particular that you've been able to lean on for support when trying to navigate the new position?
So me and Shauna, it's weird because we hadn't really talked much really in the last up until the last 6 months, because the only times we ever saw each other was at council meetings, and we'd see eye to eye on a lot of things. And that's a great thing about, probably people may not be aware, party affiliations aren't as entrenched in local stuff. I love our local area meetings because people will all agree or all disagree, and it's not about party, it's about your own beliefs, and it's really refreshing to see that, particularly when you see what happens on a national stage. And even in the council, you'll see like-minded people agree regardless of their political affiliation, and you will see people from one party agree and disagree. So that's a bit of a tangent, but me and Shauna saw eye to eye for a lot of stuff, and she was a great councillor. She was a great person, and it was only recently that we really started to talk and know each other. And it's really strange when you get to talk to another councillor, and you realize that they're not just another politician, they're another human. That sounds weird, but that they have a life, that they, I don't know, may have another partner, that they have another job, that they have other interests. And in your head, they're always just, a Ruddick, Labour, agrees with me on a lot of stuff, progressive, and not the whole person. So it was really, really great getting to know her. And then when we both got elected, we were all jokes, having a laugh. That's all been good fun. And I'm really looking forward to the next year with her. I think we have a united agenda on getting stuff done for young people and progressing mental health in the community, and making sure that when Fingal comes out of COVID, that communities are stronger, are better, and more resilient. Which sounds like a cliche, but it's true. Was there a figure that helped me a lot? Probably David Healy in the Greens. He's been a councillor for a while and was mayor before Shauna was her predecessor. He's really helped a lot, not just as a deputy mayor, but with other issues that are coming up because of his experience in the council and as a researcher for the party. He knows a lot more than myself, and it's nice. It's great having that wall to bounce things off, or somebody to say, actually, no, that's the wrong time to do it this time. It makes the job a lot easier, and I'm really, really happy that I had that.
I'm gonna throw maybe a bit of a curveball question next, but I know from your Twitter that you're a huge video game fan, and as a big fan myself, I wanted to do kind of a small little game. I wanted to throw a few character names your way, and if you know them, I'd like to get your opinion on whether you think they'd make good council colleagues and why. Does that sound good?
Yes, work away.
Okay, so the first one I have is Cortana from the Halo series.
Oh, probably a bad politician. I feel like she would not be able to hold her tongue at a lot of stuff. But also be pretty cool playing to work with an AI. And obviously like Master Chief's best friend, of course.
Mario from, I suppose, the Mario games.
I'd say he'd be great. I'd say he'd probably have
a working man,
some on the ground knowledge. Be great crack.
Tom Nook from Animal Crossing.
Ooh, I've never played Animal Crossing actually.
Oh, I thought you would. Oh, Tom Nook is a great one because Tom Nook is always kind of joked about is he's the tax collector, so he's always going in like asking for your money.
Oh, I heard about this.
Yeah,
I know. When Animal Crossing came out, everyone was like, "I hate Tom Nook," and I was like, "Who is this guy?" I'd say he was some evil guy in the game. I'd say probably be a bad guy if he's always looking to collect tax.
Crash Bandicoot from the Crash Bandicoot series.
Probably be a bad politician, but I'd love to see him on a building site. He would be efficient at destroying things.
And then finally, this is probably the most political one, Andrew Ryan from the BioShock game.
Ooh. I don't know. Probably not. Probably not. I think about that a bit more. And it's a curveball. I'm gonna be honest. He was in Infinite, was it?
No, the first one. He's the main guy in the first one.
Oh, I'm getting confused with somebody else. No, I don't know who.
So
I
Andrew
played
Ryan
Infinite.
is the guy. This is so. I suppose anyone who's listened to this like politics podcast who wants spoilers for BioShock, click off now. But
To be honest, the game's been out for over a decade.
Yeah.
If you need a spoiler warning.
so he's the initial guy who runs Rapture before it's taken over.
Oh.
The person
Then
who's
probably-
based off Iron Rand.
Probably a bad die.
Yeah.
Then, like, Rapture just, like, I've played Infinite and I've heard about BioShock 1. If whatever you're doing ends up being a horror game, not a good way to spend public money.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the ones I've wrapped up. I think, but maybe from your own experience, is there anyone particular you'd have suggested?
I was going to say, can I flip it? Out of any of those, is there anyone that you go, that's a great politician?
Honestly, out of the list I've provided, probably Mario, just because I know Cortana goes a bit nuts in like the 5th Halo game, and she tries to take over the world, and I'm not about totalitarian dictatorship. So
was it in number 3 that she goes absolutely nuts and like tries to work with the flood? No, that was.
I think it's in.
That was number 4. That was number 4. That where she. Like her lifespan
She starts
ends or
to,
something like that.
and then 5
Yeah.
she goes fully mental and takes over the world.
Yeah. Speaking of which, cannot wait for Halo Infinite. That looks amazing.
Of course. Oh my god, don't even start. We can talk about more about this after if you want to, but I feel like the general listener base has just dropped off at this stage. So I suppose my penultimate question, what would you say over the last 2 years you've been in council? Sorry, this is going back to a bit of normality. What would you say in the last sort of 2 years of being on council has been the one thing that you think the general constituents or people in general take for granted?
Probably the accessibility of local councillors. I think your local councillor is really, really accessible. A call or an email, and you can really get them to do and help with anything that they can. And a good councillor will tell you when something isn't within their remit or when something isn't achievable. Some might string you along and get your hopes up, but I'd rather if someone just says no, it's not going to happen. Sorry, it's not within my remit. You're going to have to go to someone else. Either being a department or just the council can't do that. But yeah, councillors are really, really accessible, and I think we always, before I got involved, you get the idea in your head that like councillors aren't accessible, that they're busy and that you're wasting their time, but they're always willing to work. And all my colleagues, regardless of what they believe, genuinely try to do their best for the area, and I think if you come with good intentions that they'll work with you.
And then my final question is more of a sort of an abstract philosophical question, I suppose, but at the current point, what or who inspires you?
This is a bit of a left field one. It's my granddad. My granddad was involved in the civil service for a long time, and then sort of like got me interested in asking some sort of questions around why we do this, why we do that, because of his experience in the civil service. Got me thinking about like governments at some stage at like a youngish level. And at the moment, he's fighting a battle with cancer, and he's still being himself, going out and willing to not let this battle change who he is or stop him doing what he wants to do. And in the pandemic, when you see so much negativity, I think for me, it was really nice to see someone close to home just willing to overcome it and say, screw that, I'm still being me regardless of the obstacles I face. And it means that some of the stuff that I face, and you know, when you have a bad day, you go, it's nothing in comparison to that, and to push through. So
I think a really nice positive note to finish on anyways. So I know you hate the title, but Deputy Mayor Daniel Whooley, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
thank you for having me on, and I hope to be on again, and good luck.